Hello and welcome to ScamTV, brought to you by Stamp Out Scams. Today we're taking a deep look into a federal indictment that exposes a major international fraud enterprise operating out of Ghana. This case reveals just how organized, sophisticated, and damaging romance scams and business email compromise schemes can be, and why they remain such a serious threat to people and businesses across the United States. It is important for us to cover federal indictments in video format because they provide verified, authoritative examples of how scams and fraud are prosecuted, reinforcing public trust in our mission. Video coverage also makes these complex cases easier to understand and more engaging, helping to educate and warn a wider audience about the evolving tactics of scammers. At the center of this indictment are four men: Isaac Oduro Boateng, also known as Kofi Boat; Inusa Ahmed, called Pascal; Derek Van Yeboah, nicknamed Van; and Patrick Kwame Asare, who went by Borgar. According to prosecutors, these defendants were part of a criminal enterprise that stole and laundered more than $100 million from victims. The indictment describes them not as small-time scammers, but as leaders and high-ranking members of a structured operation that ran for years. The fraud started with romance scams. Victims were often older men and women, many of them living alone, who were targeted through emails, text messages, social media, and online dating sites. The scammers posed as affectionate partners, patiently building trust and weaving false stories. Once a relationship seemed believable, the victims were convinced to transfer money. The scammers made up urgent situations, medical emergencies, legal troubles, travel problems, to justify the requests. Victims believed they were helping someone they cared about. In reality, the money was going straight into accounts controlled by the enterprise. Some victims were manipulated into unknowingly laundering money. They were persuaded to receive funds into their own accounts and then forward the money to others. The victims thought they were doing a favor for a loved one, but in fact, they were moving criminal proceeds. To make the schemes even more convincing, the scammers introduced supposed lawyers or consultants who pressured victims into sending larger sums. Within the group, victims were referred to as clients, and the stolen money was called clean money because the victims themselves initiated the transfers, making them harder to dispute with banks. The enterprise didn't stop at romance scams. They also ran business email compromise scams, or BEC fraud. These schemes targeted companies by creating fake email addresses that looked almost identical to legitimate ones. A single missing letter or symbol was often the only difference. Using those accounts, the fraudsters impersonated company executives or vendors and sent instructions to transfer money. To make the deception stronger, they attached forged documents with fake signatures to back up the requests. Employees, believing they were handling routine transactions, wired hundreds of thousands of dollars into accounts controlled by the scammers. The enterprise even had names for their schemes. They called the business email scams Alibaba, and they referred to online fraud in general as Sakawa. Members of the group were sometimes known as Sakawa Boys or Game Boys. Once money reached the United States, middlemen helped move it further. These middlemen opened business accounts in the names of shell companies that claimed to deal in cars, food imports, or shipping. They took a percentage of the stolen funds for themselves, then laundered the rest back to West Africa. At the top of the structure were the so-called chairmen, individuals who directed the operation and oversaw the flow of money. The indictment identifies Boateng and Ahmed as chairmen, while Van Yeboah and Asare also served in high-ranking roles. Van even personally ran romance scams, in addition to helping manage the broader operation. Together, this group moved more than $100 million over the course of several years. The charges are serious. The indictment includes conspiracy to commit wire fraud itself, conspiracy to commit money laundering, conspiracy to receive stolen money, and receipt of stolen money. Each of these offenses carries significant prison sentences if convicted. Prosecutors highlighted specific examples. In June of 2020, Asare messaged a co-conspirator that $187,000 in romance scam proceeds were being laundered. Later that month, Boteng arranged the transfer of $200,000. Ahmed followed with $300,000 sent through another associate. And Van personally convinced a romance victim to transfer $18,500. Each of these examples shows how coordinated and repeated their methods were. For the victims, the consequences were devastating. Many believed they had finally found love or companionship, only to discover that the person they trusted never existed. The financial loss could be ruinous, but the emotional betrayal cut even deeper. Victims described feeling humiliated, heartbroken, and isolated, often too embarrassed to tell their families what had happened. Businesses were also hit hard. A single spoofed email could lead to hundreds of thousands of dollars being wired to criminals. For small and mid-sized companies, one fraudulent transaction could mean the difference between staying afloat or shutting down. Even larger corporations suffered major financial blows. The indictment also seeks forfeiture of assets. Prosecutors intend to seize any property, money, or assets connected to the crimes. If the stolen funds have been hidden, transferred, or spent, they will pursue substitute assets of equal value. The goal is to ensure that the defendants cannot profit from the crimes, no matter how the money was moved around. This case shows how organized internet fraud can be. It wasn't just random emails or isolated lies. It was a structured enterprise with leaders, money launderers, and middlemen all working together like a business, except their business was crime. They adapted quickly, used technology to their advantage, and preyed on trust and emotion. But the case also shows the power of international cooperation. Law enforcement agencies in multiple countries work together to track down suspects, build a case, and secure extraditions. It is proof that even when scams cross borders, justice can reach across borders too. There are important lessons here for all of us. If someone you meet online starts asking for money, that is a red flag. If you receive sudden or urgent financial requests, especially from someone you've never met in person, stop and verify. And in the workplace, if an email instructs you to wire funds, double-check through an independent channel before sending anything. A simple phone call can prevent a major financial disaster. Most importantly, trust your instincts. Victims often say they felt something was off, but ignored that feeling. Slowing down, asking questions, and verifying details can make the difference between staying safe and becoming a victim. Behind the $100 million stolen in this case are dozens of real people who lost their savings, their businesses, and their peace of mind. Some lost everything. These scams are not victimless crimes. They leave lasting scars. That is why awareness is so critical. By sharing these stories, by talking openly about how scams operate, and by learning the warning signs, we can all play a role in preventing fraud. This concludes today's report on ScamTV, brought to you by Stamp Out Scams. Stay alert, stay cautious, and remember, knowledge is the best defense against fraud.